Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite show that covers all the Alberta news you need to know, the Alberta Roundup. If you're watching this as it's being released, then I'm at the Alberta UCP's AGM, where of course Danielle Smith is undergoing a leadership review, and if she receives less than 50% of the vote, a leadership election will be triggered. Additionally, 35 policy resolutions will be voted on. Articles on the results of both of these will be forthcoming at True North at tnc.news, so keep an eye out. As for leading off this episode, the Alberta legislative session resumed with a bang as the Alberta Bill of Rights amendments passed their first reading on Monday. Right before the Legislative Assembly reconvened, the UCP highlighted 13 bills that they plan on introducing this session, including the amendments to protect personal autonomy, property rights, and legal firearm ownership. While Government House Leader Joseph Schau said that they want to get all 13 bills tabled as soon as possible, the Alberta Bill of Rights was the first to be tabled. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said, quote, "Since its inception, the Alberta Bill of Rights has been a reflection of our shared values, recognizing the fundamental rights and freedoms that are essential to a free and democratic society." She continued saying, quote, "It enshrines the principles that every Albertan holds dear: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to equality before the law, among other fundamental rights." However, she explained that the Alberta Bill of Rights has not evolved with society and requires an update. The law has been untouched since its introduction in 1972. Smith said that the four key amendments included in the bill mean that Albertans will never be subject to a government vaccine mandate again, and that property rights will ensure just compensation for landowners. The legislation also includes the protection to acquire, keep, and use firearms in accordance with the law and additional freedom of expression protections. She summarized the amendments in the following way.
These amendments to the Alberta Bill of Rights are not just legal changes. They are a reaffirmation of the values that make Alberta one of the freest jurisdictions on earth.
The fall session will also tackle restrictions on gender reassignment surgeries for minors. The proposed legislation will ban such surgeries for those aged 17 and younger and prohibit puberty blockers for those 15 and younger, except with parental and professional approval for mature teens aged 16 to 17. Additionally, Smith's administration aims to implement education reforms, including an opt-in policy for gender ideology and sexual identity lessons. Reforms also ensure that biological sex restrictions are placed to ensure women and girls have access to fair sporting opportunities across the province. Co-ed divisions will be created to ensure opportunities for transgender athletes. Recently announced legislation targeting professional regulators' overreach will be part of the broader amendments to the Alberta Bill of Rights. According to Smith, the changes aim to ensure that regulatory bodies stay within their mandates, preserving free speech for professionals. Smith said, quote, "What a doctor or lawyer believes or says about politics is not a reflection of their competency to practice medicine or law." Then Schau added that the upcoming bills reflect extensive consultation with Albertans, which include the Premier traveling the province, knocking on doors, making phone calls, doing town halls, attending events, and talking to grassroots Albertans. Also, other ministers were involved in the process. However, Smith took her recent changes to the Alberta Bill of Rights a step further when she urged Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre to amend the Canadian Bill of Rights similarly to further protect the free speech and other rights of Canadians. Our next story will feature these exclusive comments made by Premier Smith at True North Nation in Calgary last Saturday. I know many of you were there, so you'd have heard the comments, but if not, then you wouldn't have, considering this was not broadcast or live streamed anywhere. It really was a you had to be there moment, as so many of True North's events are. So Smith encouraged Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre to amend the Canadian Bill of Rights to strengthen protections that may be missing in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. She said, quote, "I think that we should stop looking at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as the full, comprehensive expression of all rights and freedoms we are endowed with." The Premier said she believed Poilievre could make these amendments if he's elected Prime Minister without having a huge constitutional discussion. She said, quote, "I think we're entering an era now where people are demanding that their governments respect them and not treat them the way they were treated during that terrible COVID era. I spoke with Josh DeHaas, General Counsel at the Canadian Constitution Foundation, to learn more about the possibility of such amendments at the federal level. He said that the Canadian Bill of Rights can be amended without going through a constitutional amendment process. However, he also said that future governments could just as easily undo the amendments by using the normal statute procedure, which is, of course, the passage of a bill in the House of Commons, the Senate, and royal assent. The Canadian Bill of Rights' main purpose is to restrict Parliament from enacting laws contrary to its provisions unless Parliament is willing to repeal the act or use the notwithstanding clause, said DeHaas. He added, quote, expanding the Bill of Rights to include something like protection against vaccine mandates could have value in the sense that a future government would need to explicitly say in legislation that they're going ahead with the vaccine mandate, notwithstanding the fact that such a mandate may not comply with the Bill of Rights. He said that at the very least, the added vaccine protections in the bill would slow down the government because they would need unanimous consent to pass the bill or go through 3 readings, meaning the Bill of Rights would be more useful in protecting rights during emergencies. DeHaas said, quote, the Bill of Rights could also be used to reinforce a culture of individual freedoms since Canadians would have a document to point to that clearly states that they hold this right, rather than trying to rely on parts of the Charter like Section 7, life, liberty, and security of the person, that don't explicitly specify that people have a right not to be coerced into taking vaccines. Smith said that the Alberta Bill of Rights amendments intend to add consequences for bureaucrats and officials who violate the rights, which she said would reduce the likelihood of them being violated. DeHaas said the federal government could similarly amend the Canadian Bill of Rights to clarify that nobody can be coerced into taking a vaccine. Such an amendment would mean that no laws could be passed that allow for vaccine mandates in areas of federal jurisdiction like air, rail, interprovincial ferry travel, nor would they be able to be passed in federally regulated workplaces like banks or the public service. So, sticking with the Alberta government and law, but moving to a different aspect, the Alberta government has launched a legal challenge against the Liberals' carbon tax exemption for heating oil, arguing that the federal government's carve-outs were illegal and unconstitutional. Alberta filed an application with the federal court on Tuesday seeking a judicial review of the exemption. The province is asking the court to rule the exemption unconstitutional and unlawful, arguing that it contradicts the Liberals' stated purpose for implementing the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. In Alberta's press release explaining the application, Premier Smith said, quote, last year, Ottawa decided Canadians of the East deserved a 3-year break from paying the carbon tax on their home heating costs. She added that, quote, Albertans simply cannot stand by for another winter while the federal government picks and chooses who their carbon tax applies to. Since they won't play fair, we're going to take the federal government back to court. Smith added the following at a press conference discussing the application and why Albertans shouldn't be punished for a necessity.
In just a few weeks, winter will be upon us, and Alberta winters are no joke. In this province, winter means long nights and freezing temperatures for weeks at a time. I'm sure we all remember the polar vortex that swept through our province this past January, when daily highs remained around minus 30 degrees and lows were around minus 40 degrees, with the wind chill dropping temperatures closer to minus 50. Those temperatures are devastatingly and dangerously cold. Home heating is not optional, and in Alberta, that means we rely on natural gas not just to keep us warm, but to keep us safe. Winter is coming again, and that means that Alberta families will again feel the sting of the federal carbon tax as they heat their homes with natural gas. Here in Alberta, we don't tend to think that more taxes are the solution for anything, let alone a tax on all the things our citizens need to live and thrive in this cold climate.
She said that putting financial burdens on Canadians facing a cost of living crisis is, quote, cruel and punitive. Smith noted that Alberta has been fighting against the carbon tax since 2019 and even took it to the Supreme Court of Canada in 2021. She said, quote, it was wrong when it was made into law, and it's wrong now. The federal carbon tax has always been unfair, but the selective way it's being applied now is also unconstitutional. Alberta Minister of Justice Mickey Amery said that the province has been very successful in similar court cases in the past. He cited that the Emergencies Act was deemed unconstitutional. The courts also struck down the plastics ban, and Bill C-69 was also said to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Canada. So, the percentage of households using home heating oil in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba is less than 1%. Conversely, 40% of the households in Prince Edward Island use home heating oil, followed by 32% in Nova Scotia and 18% in Newfoundland and Labrador. Worse still, Amory said that home heating oil is a much less clean form of heating than natural gas, meaning the feds are rewarding other provinces for using a less environmentally conscious heat source. Since April 1st, 2024, when the carbon tax reached $80 per ton, Albertans have paid 35 cents in federal taxes per liter of fuel, according to the Alberta government. By 2030, some Canadians will pay more in taxes than they do for the gas itself. Smith said that since the inception of carbon taxes, Alberta school authorities have paid more than $49 million to the feds without receiving any rebate. By 2030, she projects this number will rise to $60 million a year. Alternatively, Smith said this money could, of course, be used to hire 495 teachers or 1,000 nurses. The city of Calgary could have hired an additional 112 police officers or firefighters based on the money the city sent to the Liberals in carbon tax in 2023 alone. Amory said, quote, "This exemption is not only unfair to the vast majority of Canadians, but is also unlawful as the federal government does not have the authority to make special exemptions for certain parts of the country under the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act." He added, quote, "The federal government isn't even following its own laws now. Someone needs to hold them accountable, and Alberta is stepping up to do just that." Amory said he expects the legal challenge to take approximately 1 year, and Smith mentioned that she texted both British Columbia Premier David Eby and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe to congratulate them on their recent re-elections. She said that she invited Moe to join the court case, and of course Alberta and Saskatchewan have joined forces before. However, Smith noted that she hopes a federal election is called, quote, "sooner rather than later," so that a more constructive conversation can be had with the next government. Now, moving on to our last story of the day, going back to the class certification that we've previously discussed in past episodes of the Alberta Roundup. So, you may all remember that business owners in Alberta were trying to get certified as a class to sue the provincial government for damages incurred during the pandemic lockdowns. The controversy from this lawsuit was, of course, that the business owners would be suing themselves, the taxpayer, because, of course, any government money is indeed taxpayers' money. So, the suit was initially filed by Rath & Company in February 2024. And the lawsuit is spearheaded by two primary plaintiffs, Rebecca Ingram, a gym owner, and Christopher Scott, owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe. Both allege that their businesses suffered substantial losses due to public health orders issued by Alberta's former Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dina Hinshaw, during the pandemic, before her being removed from her role by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in 2022. You may also recall I mentioned that Justice Phoebe said he'd aim to have a decision ready by December the 1st. But now, coming a month ahead of schedule, the class has indeed been certified. So according to Eva Chipiak, who shared the decision, she said that the court certified the class consisting of, quote, "all individuals who owned, in whole or in part, a business or businesses in Alberta that was subject to full or partial closure or operational restrictions mandated by the CMOH orders between March 17th, 2020 and the date of certification." For clarity, owned does not include ownership as a shareholder in a corporation or as a member of a cooperative. Lead counsel on the case, Jeff Rath, stated, quote, "This is a huge day for Alberta businesses that were illegally harmed by Jason Kenney and Dina Hinshaw. The court found that the action can proceed against the government of Alberta on a number of grounds, including misfeasance in the public office, allowing the plaintiffs to seek punitive damages against the Alberta government for wrongdoing." So again, I'll be writing a follow-up article on this class action and how it will proceed going forward once I get a chance to sit down with the lawyers. Stay tuned at tnc.news and keep your eye out for it. Before concluding today's episode, I hope you all could take a moment to pray for Edmonton Oilers' captain Connor McDavid to have a steadfast recovery. For any Oilers fans, my prayers are with you as our team has just gone from bad to worse with McDavid's injury. But in times of adversity like these, maybe people will step up and finally start playing with some heart, and hopefully will be better for it in the long run. So last week's show was, of course, an interview with Pro-Life Alberta Executive Director Richard Durr, and evidently the AGM is occurring at the same time of this video's release. So, going into the comment roundup, we'll try and focus on some of the comments that may still be relevant, irrespective of the results of the leadership review. So, the first comment comes from @Malcolm in Calgary, who said, quote, "I like what Smith has done so far. If the members push too hard too fast, I think that will pave the way for the Nenshi NDP comeback. That's the last thing Alberta needs." Yeah, that's right, Malcolm. And it's also one of my biggest fears that UCP members will punish Smith for not doing a few things as that they might have requested, like the income tax cut, for example, but they'll overlook all of the good she's done for the province. Not only this, but of course, I mean, show me a better premier in Canada. You can't. Show me a better candidate. You can't. There is nobody that will give the UCP a better chance in the next provincial election. Let's take a moment to remember the havoc that Naheed Nenshi unleashed on Calgary and now let him run the province. I mean, you can only imagine what we'd have to live through. Let's not help his chances. Of course, we'll know today, Saturday, what Smith's approval rating looks like based on the leadership review, and I'm sure she's hoping for around 80 to 90% or even higher, but hopefully she got it. One thing I'll add quickly is how grateful Smith said that she is for the leadership review. She said she bets the Liberal caucus, the federal Liberal caucus, wishes they had such a mechanism to remove a leader that nobody likes, aka Justin Trudeau. The next comment comes from @PearlyQ3560, who said, quote, "Social transitioning at school should also have parental consent, not just medical." Yeah, I picked this comment out because I agree with you 100%. In fact, so does Premier Smith, who said at an unrelated press conference on Wednesday that the CAS review, which again, as you'll remember, is one of the leading reviews in the world on transgenderism in youth. Anyways, the CAS review highlighted that social transition is almost an 100% pathway to medicalization. So Smith said, quote, "When a child starts identifying as the opposite gender, wearing clothes of the opposite gender, using the opposite gender bathroom and locker room, that locks in their conception of who they are. And then that leads to puberty blockers, and puberty blockers is often told as a way to buy time for kids to figure things out." Smith added that, quote, "The fact of the matter is, if you don't go through puberty, you can't have children. You have to become sexually mature to be able to have children." And again, what they discovered is that it's almost a 100% pathway from going to puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones. So I just don't feel comfortable having a 10-year-old make a decision that they don't want to have babies. Like, I just think that it's not something that 10-year-olds are able to do. So we're going to support kids in who they want to be as adults, but those are adult decisions to be made. So with this logic, of course, social transitioning at school should require parental notification and consent, and this may help the few situations wherein children are being indoctrinated by teachers or other nefarious adults. Of course, a parent should be completely involved in their child's life and have that say. So the last comment comes from @LeonaPurdue8784, who asked, quote, "Albertans voted her in. How does the membership review get to vote her out?" So yeah, I thought I'd clarify this because there seems to have been some confusion in some of the past comments. So I just want to explain to you who don't understand the UCP's process. So essentially, leadership reviews are automatically held at 1 out of every 3 AGMs in non-election years. Members vote by secret ballot on the question, "Do you approve of the current leader?" And to be eligible to vote in this leadership review, voters must have been party members since at least October 11th, 2024, register for the AGM, and attend in person. Now, interestingly, when Smith was speaking at True North Nation last Saturday, she said that around 5,500 people were registered to attend the AGM. So by this point, at least 6,000 are expected to attend, myself included. So if you guys see me there, feel free to stop by and say hi. I'll just be working on a few articles. So hopefully I won't be too pressed. And of course, the leadership review results are expected to be announced by 5:30 p.m. on Saturday. So I'll definitely publish a breaking news article on tnc.news when the results are known, so keep your eye out for that. And again, I will also be publishing an article on some of the more interesting policies that were voted on. Of the 35 policy resolutions at the AGM, I counted 18 of interest. I'm hopeful that UCP members will make the right decision for the future of the province. Let me know in the comments what you think of the UCP's internal process for leadership reviews, and if you think that this should be widespread among all political parties. Thank you, God bless, and have a great week.